In the United States, many of the most unusual foods you find in supermarkets weren't created in restaurants. They were born in apartments where someone lived alone. They were invented by and for people who needed to eat quickly, without dirtying dishes, and without depending on anyone else. Number 11 appeared as a hot solution for those who almost never cooked at home, and quietly became a classic of solitary nights. And number 2 was born simply because turning on the stove already felt like too much effort. But hunger couldn't wait. These 17 foods tell the story of how millions of Americans learned to feed themselves while living alone. Let's start with the number 17, spray cheese. In the industrial plains of the mid-1960s, a chemical marvel emerged that defied the laws of dairy nature and redefined the concept of spreading. Imagine a world where you don't need the friction of a knife or the resistance of a cutting board, but a pressurized trigger to top your crackers with ballistic precision. This invention, originally dubbed Snack Mate, SEC, was born in Nabisco's laboratories under an almost aerospace-inspired premise. They were looking for a way to make cheese as portable, sterile, and functional as an aerosol deodorant. The result was a triumph of food engineering over traditional biology, eliminating the need for refrigeration through an alchemy of emulsifying salts and phosphates that keep the product in a state of perpetual youth. The texture is a metaphor for a dense orange cloud that settles on the palate, like a caress of molten plastic, transforming any dry bite into a celebration of processed sodium. Pressing the nozzle releases a ribbon of neon color that defies gravity, allowing for the creation of ephemeral architectures of flavor on a piece of bread or even directly in the air. It's the ideal companion for someone who lives alone because no one judges the artistic precision with which you draw yellow spirals directly on your mouth during a night of existential introspection. This product encapsulates the space age, an era where efficiency and technology were more important than the organic origin of the ingredients. Spray cheese isn't just food, it's a cultural manifesto celebrating humanity's victory over laziness, transforming the act of eating into a game of atmospheric pressure and industrial design. Before continuing, subscribe and like so more people can rediscover different foods invented by and for Americans living alone. 16. Frozen TV dinner. The story of this icon of domestic modernity begins in the 1950s, in an office of C.A. Swanson & Sons, where a logistical miscalculation left the company with a surplus of 260 tons of turkey after Thanksgiving. While the birds were freezing in rail cars, an ingenious salesman named Jerry Thomas suggested using compartmentalized aluminum trays, similar to those used in airplanes, to create complete individual portions. Thus was born the concept of dinner in front of the television, a ritual that changed not only our diets, but also the architecture of our living rooms, displacing the dining table with the coffee table and the sofa. This invention was the first step toward the democratization of convenience, allowing the home to become a private cinema with instant catering. The consistency of the mashed potatoes is a metaphor for a white silk canvas, melting beneath a comforting grayish sauce, a contrast of temperatures and textures that only the microwave or oven can harmonize. It was designed for the man or woman who, after a long day at the office or factory, simply wanted a miniature feast without the hassle of washing dishes or turning on the stove. In every compartment, from the sweet corn to the warm apple dessert, lies the promise of perfect, controlled domestic order. It is the perfect time capsule of a nation that learned to eat by looking at a screen, transforming the social act of dinner into an individualistic, visual experience. The TV dinner symbolizes the triumph of logistics over traditional cooking, a monument to the aluminum foil that taught us happiness could come preheated in just 20 minutes. 15. Instant mac and cheese in a cup. Instant mac and cheese in a cup was born as if someone wanted to bottle a warm hug for those who live alone and arrive home with no energy left to even think. It emerged in the 1990s in a small product development office in Pittsburgh, where fluorescent lights buzzed like mosquitoes and employees searched for ideas to make life easier. There, amidst cups of cold brew coffee and whiteboards covered in doodles, a team of young inventors decided that classic mac and cheese needed a version for modern life. Fast, portable, and hassle-free. The idea came from a woman named Karen, who lived alone and was always late getting home. She said all she wanted was something warm that wouldn't make her feel so alone. And so mac and cheese in a cup was born. Tiny pasta that cooked in minutes, powdered cheese that melted like a golden sunset, and a creamy texture that glided like a soft blanket over your shoulders. It was food that didn't judge, that didn't ask for plates, that didn't demand company. People would try it and feel like they were eating a little piece of home, even if they lived in a tiny studio apartment with thin walls. It was perfect for movie nights, for quick breaks, for those moments when you just want something comforting. Today, this invention remains a symbol of independence, of self-sufficiency, of that blend of freedom and solitude that defines so many Americans who live alone. And whoever eats it feels like they're holding a little yellow life preserver. 14. The honey peanut butter sandwich on white bread. The honey peanut butter sandwich was born in quiet apartments where the kitchen is so small it barely fits one person, and where dinner is often decided by whatever's left in the pantry. Although peanut butter is an older invention, this honey version became popular among Americans living alone in the 1970s, when life was fast-paced, schedules were chaotic, and food had to be simple yet comforting. The most repeated story tells of a young Ohio student named Mark who lived in a college dorm where the shared kitchen was always busy. One night, tired and hungry, he mixed peanut butter with honey because he didn't have any jam. The result was a sandwich that tasted of childhood, of quiet afternoons, of something that needed no instructions. The texture was a sticky poem, the peanut butter thick as sweet mud, the honey sliding like a golden thread, and the white bread soft as a shy cloud. Anyone who tried it felt like they were eating something effortless, something that filled their stomach and warmed their heart a little too. It was perfect for those who lived alone because it required no cooking, made almost no mess, and could be prepared even half asleep. Over time, this sandwich became a quiet classic, an unsung hero of lonely nights, a reminder that the simplest food can be the most honest. Today, it remains a favorite among those looking for something quick and sweet, something that can be made with one hand while checking their phone with the other. And whoever eats it feels like they're biting into a little refuge. 13. The frozen personal pizza. The frozen personal pizza was born as if someone wanted to give everyone their own round slice of happiness. It emerged in the suburbs of Minnesota in the 1980s, when families were beginning to change their routines, and many young people were moving out on their own for the first time. In a factory where the air smelled of raw dough and cold cheese, a group of food developers decided to create a pizza that didn't need to share space with another person or another slice. The idea came from a man named Steve, who lived alone in a small apartment with an oven that seemed more decorative than functional. He wanted a pizza that wouldn't be left over, that wouldn't go to waste, that wouldn't make him feel like he was eating for two. Thus, the personal pizza was born, a small crust, crispy at the edges like dry leaves, soft in the center like a warm pillow, covered in cheese that melted like a slow smile. It was food designed for one person, without guilt, without explanations. People tried it and felt like they were eating a private luxury. It was perfect for video game nights, for binge-watching series, for those moments when you want something hot without having to talk to anyone. The frozen personal pizza became a symbol of independence, of convenience, of that mix of freedom and chaos that defines living alone. 12. The frozen microwave burrito. The microwavable frozen burrito was born as if someone wanted to encapsulate all the rush, the weariness, and the freedom of living alone inside a tortilla. It emerged in California in the 1970s, when thousands of young people were moving into their first apartments, those where the kitchen was so small that opening the refrigerator door was already a challenge. In a Los Angeles factory, where the smell of masa and beans mingled with the noise of machines that seemed to breathe, a group of developers sought to create a meal that could save anyone on a night of sudden hunger. The idea came from a man named Richard, who lived alone and worked double shifts. He said he didn't have time to cook, but he also didn't want to live on cereal. Thus, the frozen burrito was born. A tortilla as soft as a warm blanket, filled with beans as thick as sweet mud, cheese that melted like a slow hug, and meat that tasted like a makeshift home. The texture was a small miracle, firm on the outside, soft on the inside, as if the burrito held a warm secret waiting to be discovered. Anyone who tried it felt like they were eating something that understood their life. It was perfect for late-night study sessions, for early morning gaming sessions, for those moments when you just want something warm without having to do the dishes. The frozen burrito became a symbol of independence, of modern survival, of that mix of chaos and comfort that defines those who live alone. To this day, it remains a classic in freezers across the country, and whoever eats it feels like they're holding a little lifeline wrapped in a tortilla. 11. Instant ramen in a cup. The experience of drinking ramen from a mug begins long before the first bite. It's a ritual of liquid refuge held in tiny apartments, dorm rooms, and neon-lit offices. Those who try it feel they are receiving something that asks for nothing in return, a symbol of solitary life that is at once practical, economical, and always unconditional. On those cold nights or during quick breaks, the steam rising from the mug becomes a silent companion for those who simply seek solace in the stillness of their routine. This invention didn't spring from haute cuisine, but from a pure need for edible comfort. It was in the 1980s when a development team in California, surrounded by walls covered in sketches and fueled by coffee and dreams, decided that instant noodles needed to evolve. They were looking for a version that required only hot water and minimal patience, a solution for Americans living alone and lacking culinary skills. The ultimate inspiration came through Emily, a young woman whose studio had a temperamental stove that rarely worked. She was looking for a meal that wouldn't let her down when her own cooking did. The result was a warm poem of textures, noodles as thin as threads of rain, and a broth as light as a sigh, smelling of immediate comfort. Inside the cup, small pieces of vegetables float like scattered memories, completing an embrace that warms from deep within the chest. 10. The frozen egg and cheese sandwich. Before the chaos of traffic and the sound of notifications invade the day, there's a brief moment of calm measured in 60 seconds in the microwave. The frozen egg and cheese sandwich has become the symbol of modern mornings, a quick and imperfect ritual designed for those who navigate life between rushing and coffee. For someone who lives alone, this food is a salvation that requires no pans or plates, just a minute of hope and the certainty of a breakfast that never fails. It is, in essence, biting into a portable sunrise before facing the outside world. The genesis of this morning comfort takes us back to the 1990s, to a production plant in Ohio where the clinking of conveyor belts set the pace for innovation. There, a team of engineers sought to capture the essence of home in a format that could be prepared even with your eyes half closed. The spark came from Tom, a worker who, in his loneliness and chronic lateness, dreamed of a breakfast that didn't require thought, but was simply there to rescue him. Thus emerged this architecture of convenience, bread as soft as a warm cloud, protecting a fluffy egg and cheese that yields to the heat like a slow-burning ray of sunshine. The final consistency is a poem to resilience, a warm, comforting embrace that seems to whisper to the palate that everything will be all right. With its melted cheese acting as emotional glue, this sandwich managed to transform the coldness of a freezer into a little piece of peace. Today, it continues to be a quiet and favorite inhabitant of solitary kitchens, proving that even in the age of speed, there is always room for a comfort that feels like a freshly made mattress for the soul. 9. The grilled cheese pan for one. There are flavors that don't need explaining, but rather offer refuge. A grilled cheese sandwich for one is, above all, a symbol of independence. That unique blend of freedom and vulnerability that defines those who have learned to be content in their own company. It emerged in the 1950s, a time when small apartments in major American cities were beginning to fill with people living alone for the first time. In those corners where the kitchen was barely a trace of space, this sandwich became an everyday miracle, a little slice of golden calm cooked in a single pan and enjoyed without any fuss. The legend of this treat takes us to a tiny New York studio apartment, where a young woman named Linda would return home, the weariness of long days weighing heavily on her shoulders. One night, in front of a nearly empty refrigerator, bread and cheese met on the stove, accompanied by the sounds of the night rising from the alley. That improvised recipe proved that you don't need a banquet to feel comforted, just the right temperature and a little patience. The texture of this dish is a poem of simple contrasts, a crispy surface that yields to a center of melted cheese, which stretches like a thread of light between the halves of the bread. It's the perfect companion for rainy days or winter nights, moments when hunger mingles with the need for emotional warmth. Whoever makes it knows that as long as there's a hot pan and a piece of cheese, there will always be a way to transform loneliness into a toasted embrace. 8. The cereal bowl for dinner. In the 1970s, a quiet food began to take shape in American kitchens. Eating cereal for dinner became the perfect escape for those living alone. It all started in a tiny corner of Chicago, where a man named Paul, overwhelmed by a cramped kitchen and the exhaustion of his day, decided to ignore the cookbooks. By opening that box and pouring in cold milk, he not only prepared a quick meal, but he transformed the concept of dinner into something as relaxed as an after-hours breakfast. This culinary choice functioned as a metaphor for absolute freedom, where the crunch of each bite evoked the sound of footsteps on dry autumn leaves, while the cool liquid flowed with the gentleness of a river. Paul found in that bowl a vital lightness. It was a dish that demanded no talent, imposed no conditions, and above all, did not judge the diner. It was the ultimate expression of a meal that asks nothing in return for its immediate gratification. Those who succumbed to this custom participated in a small but significant act of daily rebellion. The late-night cereal became the ideal refuge for those days when the stove felt like an adversary and exhaustion clouded one's will. Currently, this habit persists in countless homes as a ritual of peace. Consuming it today continues to be a way of embracing nostalgia, allowing a fragment of childhood to return to us, disguised as a simple dinner. 7. Instant mashed potatoes. The search for comfort in powder form gave rise to instant mashed potatoes during the heady 1960s. In a processing plant in Idaho, surrounded by vast agricultural horizons that resembled golden oceans, a group of creative minds sought a way to offer home without the tedium of traditional preparation. The goal was clear: to eliminate the need to peel, boil, and mash, allowing Americans living alone to find instant warmth in their meals. Harold was the driving force behind this innovation, a man who, despite his disdain for cooking, cherished the memory of his childhood homemade mashed potatoes. He longed for an edible companion that would ease the silence of his lonely nights in a matter of minutes. The result was those light flakes, similar to dry snow, which, when melted with hot water, transformed into a thermal cloud. That texture, comparable to the softness of a freshly laundered blanket, offered a nourishing, creamy, and deeply comforting embrace for the soul. Savoring this invention was, essentially, consuming a concentrated dose of nostalgia. It proved to be the perfect ally for freezing days or those vulnerable moments when one simply seeks to feel a little less alone. Thus, instant mashed potatoes solidified their status as an emblem of emotional survival and pure practicality, uniting tenderness with the simplicity of modern life. To this day, their presence is indispensable in pantries across the nation. Anyone who serves themselves a portion knows that beyond food, what they hold in their hands is a small haven of warmth. 6. The corn dog. The story of this famous snack takes us straight to the great Texas state fairs of the 1940s. In those places, the sounds of laughter and music always mingled with that distinctive aroma of hot oil and freshly cooked food. It is said that some very resourceful street vendors were looking for a solution to a common problem. They wanted people to be able to eat sausages without having to use utensils or plates, or get their hands greasy as they walked alone through the crowds. That's how they invented this sort of magic wand, which is nothing more than a sausage coated in a layer of cornmeal batter that becomes golden and very crispy when fried. The outer texture is like a sweet, sandy armor protecting a tender, juicy, meaty core. Biting into it reveals a contrasting array of flavors and sensations that dance on the tongue, perfectly blending sweet and savory. The inventor, a man named Neil Fletcher, transformed the food on a stick concept into a true symbol of freedom for modern people. For someone who lives alone and comes home tired, a corn dog is the greatest trophy they can find in their freezer. It doesn't dirty dishes, it doesn't need anyone to accompany them to enjoy it. And with just the first bite, it transforms a quiet kitchen into a mini carnival. It's truly a fun invention designed to make everyday survival much more cheerful and manageable. And if you're enjoying discovering these foods invented for Americans who live alone, subscribe and like so you don't miss what's coming next. 5. Ready-to-serve canned soups. In the industrial heart of New Jersey, just as the 19th century drew to a close, a visionary chemist named John Dorrance forever changed the course of modern food by revolutionizing how the world perceived a simple metal can. His ingenuity lay not in adding, but in subtracting. By removing much of the water from traditional recipes, he made each can into a home-cooked concentrate compact enough to fit in the palm of your hand. This invention was specifically designed for the lonely souls beginning to populate the big cities, people who lacked the time or space to boil bones and vegetables for hours over a wood-burning stove. Inside that container, pieces of vegetables float like small islands of vibrant color in a sea of industrial flavor, offering a comforting visual landscape. This food was born out of the urgent need to feed a new workforce that, due to the frenetic pace of the industrial age, could no longer return home to share a family lunch. Today, the act of opening a can has become a small but powerful act of rebellion against the unnecessary complexity of contemporary life. It's a constant reminder that warmth and comfort can come vacuum-sealed, ready to be rescued. This food teaches us that sometimes loneliness and cold can be cured with something as simple as a can opener, a microwave, and the patience to wait a couple of minutes. 4. Microwave bacon. This invention is a direct result of the American obsession with absolute morning efficiency, a concept born and perfected in the meat processing laboratories of Arkansas. During the 1980s, industrial scientists grasped a fundamental truth about the modern consumer. The average bachelor deeply loved the taste of smoked pork, but harbored a visceral hatred for the task of cleaning up the splattered grease on the stovetop after cooking. Based on this premise, they created pre-cooked strips wrapped in layers of absorbent paper that seemed to defy the laws of time and culinary physics. Biting into the bacon releases an aroma that instantly fills the house, creating a comforting, albeit somewhat deceptive feeling of a weekend family breakfast. This product was specifically designed for those who live by the relentless dictates of the clock, allowing the sacred ritual of Sunday to occur in a mere 60 seconds on an ordinary Tuesday morning. It is without a doubt the food of the pragmatists, those who prefer instant crunch and immediate cleanup to patient waiting and the lingering aroma of slow cooking. It is an invention that successfully demonstrates that in this country, even the most rustic and traditional pleasure can be tamed by electromagnetic waves. At the end of the day, microwave bacon represents the victory of convenience over technology, offering a dose of fatty gratification that requires no commitment, just a start button and a minute of patience. 3. Boxed macaroni and cheese. During the harshest years of the Great Depression, in the halls of a company in Illinois, a deep blue box was born that would become the ultimate emblem of economic survival. It all began when a resourceful salesman at the Kraft Company realized he could package boxes of dried pasta together with packets of powdered processed cheese, guaranteeing a complete and filling meal for just a few cents. The consistency of the resulting sauce, once blended with milk and butter, is a metaphor for a silky orange lava that envelops each tube of pasta in a sticky, warm, and profoundly comforting embrace. This dish has become the go-to food for those who live alone, for one powerful reason. It's virtually impossible to mess up. It's a universal language of comfort that asks no difficult questions and demands no chef's skills. It simply offers satisfaction. Although born out of a need stemming from collective hunger, the product has been perfected to suit the individual isolation of modern life. It quickly became a refuge for millions of college students and lone workers who find in that shimmering powder a mystical connection to their own childhoods. It's living proof that American ingenuity possesses the unique ability to transform the simplest and cheapest ingredients into a global cultural icon. Boxed macaroni and cheese doesn't need a table full of guests or fancy china to shine. Its true magic lies in the honesty of its flavor and the fulfilled promise of a hot meal that always tastes exactly the same as the last time. 2. The microwave quesadilla. The microwave quesadilla was born as if someone wanted to turn laziness into a hot meal. It emerged in the 1990s when Americans living alone were looking for quick meals that required nothing more than a tortilla, cheese, and a microwave that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. In a Phoenix apartment, where the heat streamed in through the windows like a persistent visitor, a young woman named Carla invented her minimalist version of the quesadilla. Carla worked in a store and came home exhausted. One night, too tired to turn on the stove, she put a tortilla with cheese in the microwave. What came out was a small miracle. Cheese melted like gentle lava, a tortilla warm like a freshly folded blanket, and an aroma that filled the apartment as if someone had actually cooked. The texture was a simple embrace, the cheese stretching like threads of sunlight, and the tortilla soft as a caress. Anyone who tried it felt like they were eating something that understood their weariness. It was perfect for long nights, for days when you just want something warm and effortless, for those moments when life feels too heavy. The microwave quesadilla became a symbol of modern survival, of minimal creativity, of that familiar mix of hunger and laziness. Today, it remains a classic impromptu meal, and whoever eats it feels like they're holding onto a small personal victory. 1. The ready-made chicken wrap from the supermarket. We've reached the pinnacle of individual nutrition. The supermarket ready-made chicken wrap was born as if someone wanted to condense haste into an edible cylinder. It emerged in the early 2000s, when thousands of Americans living alone began relying on the prepared food sections to survive weeks filled with work, traffic, and exhaustion. In a Seattle supermarket where white lights shone like an artificial sunrise and refrigerators hummed like a mechanical choir, an employee named Jenna decided to mix cold chicken, lettuce, and a large tortilla to create something quick, fresh, and hassle-free. Jenna lived alone in a small apartment overlooking an alley. She always said she didn't have time to cook, but she also didn't want to live on frozen food. That's how the wrap was born. A tortilla as soft as a light blanket, chicken as tender as a warm memory, lettuce as crisp as freshly cut leaves, and a dressing that flowed like a creamy river. The texture was a dance between firm and soft, as if the wrap wanted to remind people that life can be simple without being boring. Anyone who tried it felt like they were eating something that understood their rhythm. It was perfect for quick lunches, impromptu dinners, those moments when you just want something you can hold in one hand while checking your phone with the other. The chicken wrap became a symbol of modern life, practical, light, always available. Today, it remains a specialty food in supermarkets across the country, and anyone who eats it feels like they're holding a small, rolled-up life preserver.